Everyone, it's just about a minute before 1 o'clock. We'll give everyone a couple more minutes to join and then we'll go ahead and get started. It is currently 2 minutes after 1 o'clock. Looks like we've got a very full house online. So I want to thank you all for your participation in this week's call. Just as a reminder, this call will be recorded for those who are unable to join us today or would like to review either the slides or the presentation at a later time. The purpose of the call is to provide information for our transit system partners. It is not intended for the press. Today we're going to go ahead and give you, as usual, an update on the CARES Act implementation. We'll talk a little bit about the budget and the drawdowns, the surveys that we have ongoing, training upcoming, and then we'll wrap up with any questions that you all have. At this point, we have had 55 claims submitted. This represents about $6.7 million in claims, and of that, we have paid out $4.8 million. This graph right here shows you the drawdowns over time. So we had our first submission at the very end of June. So in the last 2 months, approximately, we have received just a little over, just a little under $7 million. This is far less than the initial allotment of CARES Act funding that we requested. So we do want to, again, encourage you very much so to submit claims, no less frequently than quarterly, but as often as 1 time per month. We are not exactly sure why these claims have not been submitted yet, but we do encourage you, if you have any concerns or questions about the process or the procedures, to please let us know. We are being asked, why the drawdowns have not met that first initial allotment of cash. So if you have reasons why you have not submitted claims as of yet, whether it was waiting for the beginning of the fiscal year, whether it's questions about how to submit or what's eligible, please let us know what those questions are so we can be prepared to answer as to why we're not at that $20 million at this point. Just so we're prepared to respond to any inquiries of that nature. Just as a reminder, these questions are being posed not only on the state level, but also on the federal level. So there are delays in drawing down the funds across the state and across the country, excuse me. And I understand that there's reasons for that, but because of the delay of drawing down, it is going to make it difficult for us to justify either additional monies on the federal side through the HEROES Act or additional needs for money on this state level as well. So again, I want to go ahead and apologize again for sending out the email on Monday and then having to revise those numbers today. But we have received funding for the phase 2 of the 5311 CARES funding. Those new values were emailed to you this morning to initiate a change order in EBS. Please use those new values that were provided in today's email. If for some reason you have already submitted your change order with the improper numbers, we'll fix it on our end, but please do use those new values. As a reminder, please do not forget to include your expected fair revenue through June 30th of 2020 in your budget. If you fail to do so, those are going to actually take away from the year total allotment of funds being available. So make sure that you include your anticipated fair revenue. And the ADTEP funds are still awaiting approval, which actually that's old. So let me switch to my next slide. I didn't change that. So ADTEP CARES was actually approved yesterday. We will be sending you a table if you are in one of those eligible transit systems with your FTA award amounts that will via email, we will send that out. Just as a reminder, this will require a new application for this funding. The 5311 CARES Act Phase 1 and Phase 2 are handled under one agreement with an amendment, but these are new, additional, different funds, and they will require an application. These contracts will be processed after the supplemental contracts are done, just so that we can ensure that the bulk of the money to the bulk of the systems is made available. The 5307 GA funds are in final concurrence with FTA, so we are hopefully close to an award. As soon as we hear anything about that, we will let you know. And if it happens outside of our normal scheduled call, we will send out an email to all systems. Just to give you an update on the budget, you may have had or heard some issues about IMD and the budget and NCDOT and the budget. We are still working to finalize our fiscal year 21 budget. Because of that, any agreements or contracts that are out there right now that have a state portion, they're not being signed off on. So if you've got a contract that's out or an agreement that's out that you're waiting for us to fully execute and there are state funds associated with that, that's most likely the source of the delay. If you have a FTA grant with either all 100% federal or it's just federal and local that you have not seen movement on, please contact your MDS to let us know, because we're moving forward, we're trying to move forward the ones that we can, but until we get our final budget approved by the board and by OSBM, we're kind of limited on what we can do with state funds. Again, we are going to focus in on fiscal year 21 closing out any legacy grants. This is primarily due to the fact that we are going to be tied to a cash spend target, and we will not be able to exceed that target. So just keep in mind that, to work with your MDS as closely as possible when it comes to, any questions you have about either legacy FTA grants or grants for fiscal year 21. I also want to highlight the fact that we have two surveys out. They were both sent out on Monday. The first one is very, very important. The deadline is August 31st, which is Monday. We would ideally love to have responses to these as soon as possible. With the legislature coming back into session the first part of September, we really need to have this information to help inform the transit funding discussions with state leaders. We've used some of our OpStat reports to develop some preliminary numbers, but we really are going to need these numbers from you to update those and make it very specific to your transit system. If you have any questions about that survey, please direct them to Ryan Brumfield or your MDS. And then there's also a new COVID-19 response system survey out there to find out how your system is adjusting to issues resulting from the pandemic. Please fill this one out also as soon as possible, and then update as needed. It's very important for us to be able to have impacts and understand how those are evolving over time. To give you an update again on some training opportunities and informational opportunities that are coming up, the last webinar for the fiscal year 22 application call for projects is tomorrow from 10 to 12. So if you were not able to attend the August 20th webinar, please try to make time to do so tomorrow. This will be recorded, so if you're unable to do it, you can still be able to get that information.
Heather, this is
yes.
Carolyn.
Hi, Carolyn.
Can you go back to that previous slide?
Yep.
A call or two ago, someone pointed out the due date, November 27th, was actually Thanksgiving weekend. So that date was revised to Tuesday, December the 1st. for the
Tuesday,
application.
December 1st. Okay, I will make a note of that and I will change it on the slides. Thank you,
Okay.
Carolyn.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right, so then our next NC Transit Cares meeting, the Work On It meeting, will be September 9th from 9 to 11. Please make sure to block that time out on your calendars if at all possible. The last meeting was very well attended. We got some wonderful feedback. We hope to have the same number or same amount of participation in this call. We will have guest speakers that will be talking about cashless payment technologies and the role of air ventilation in disease spread. This is going to be very important with respect to, COVID response, it being an airborne, well, it's not really airborne illness, but obviously, being spread through, cough and, particulates from expression of air. So finding out how we can improve not only our cleanliness with respect to the touch surfaces, but also improving ventilation to help minimize disease spread. Breakout groups will be discussing and prioritizing key solutions that were identified in the first meeting. You'll be placed into a group based on your preference for discussing those groups. So you received a calendar appointment to block out that time for September, but you also must register. So please, within the calendar invitation, follow the link to register for this event. Also, as a reminder, we have upcoming our training series starting September 22nd for any new transit system staff or those who need a refresher. These sessions will be approximately 1 to 2 hours long every Tuesday and Thursday between September 22nd and October 15th. All of these sessions will be recorded and posted on our website in case you're not able to attend one or more of these sessions. Also, just as a reminder, all of the masks that we have received from FTA that have been requested have been sent out. If you made a request for masks and you have not yet received them, please let us know so we can find out, where maybe it is in the system. I also wanted to let you know that we still have 4,600 masks remaining. So if you need additional masks, they are as what's pictured there on the screen. They're the cloth masks that are reusable. Please contact IMD if you need any additional masks. Funnel those requests primarily through Kevin, but you can contact your MDS directly and let them know. And FTA is also asked if we happen to have any photos of either the staffer or riders wearing these masks, to please share that. And you can just go ahead and send those pictures to your MDS, and then we can then collect them and share them with FTA as needed. And with that, I will turn it back over to Blair to see if there's any questions. Okay. First question is, we recently received order forms to replace 10 approved vehicles. Will there be a state match for these vehicles that have been approved in the last grant? If there isn't a state match, we may only be able to order half now until additional match can be found. This is a really specific question. I will defer to Tammy. Are you on? I believe the previous grant awards did have the state match included, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Can you answer that, or should we just have them reach out to us directly? Tammy, you really broke up.
I think
not being able to hear the response, we will follow up with that question directly just to make sure that you get the correct answer. Funds are restricted to operational, and it is taking time to get operational projects approved for procurement. Again, I assume this is going to why there's a delay in getting claims submitted. Just keep in mind that operational in the case of CARES funding also includes administration. So any funds that you would have for admin, whether it be salary, etc., that goes under operational. So the main difference between CARES and your traditional funding is that we put everything under operational. We didn't break it out between operations and admin, but everything that is typically fundable under administration is funded under operations. So, please, if you have any questions about eligibility or how to submit claims, reach out to your MDS, because we really do want to demonstrate to the legislature, especially with them coming back into session, that we need the CARES money and that we will be drawing it down quickly. Okay, can you send out instructions on how to make amendments in EBS from the email this morning? Yes, we can do that. I will have to draft those, but we can pull something like that together. How many systems must be involved for the mobility management grant?
Heather, this is Carolyn. I can answer that.
Good. Thanks, Carolyn.
You're welcome. 3 systems minimum, 1 being the applicant, is required for the mobility management grant.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And additional information, that is a 50% local share amount.
Okay. We haven't received any updates on fiscal year 20 5339 capital funds. Do you have any updates on 5339? We need to order vehicles as soon as possible and are unable to do so. That is one of the grants that was actually identified on a call earlier today that has not seen any movement. We are following up on that to find out where that is, and we will let you know. Certainly the recipients of the fiscal year 20 5339 grants. Federally funded purchases must follow the bidding requirements set forth in uniform guidance. Can CARES Act transportation funding be appropriated for purchases on a cooperative or NC state contract, whether the UG bidding guidelines were followed or not? We'll have to follow up with this one. Right now, with all of the CARES Act funding that we, NCDOT, is administering the 5311, it's only operations, it's not capital. For the 5307, you would have to follow all normal guidance from FTA, but we can get some clarification on that. We received correspondence this morning with a provision for upping our local match in case the state can't participate. Why wouldn't the state be able to participate? I thought that was required. It's not required. It is something that North Carolina does do that other states do not. We do receive some funding through appropriations to provide a local match or a state match, excuse me, to FTA grants. However, this kind of boils back down to the whole issue with respect to our budgets and the cash spend targets. And so one of the things that we discussed on an earlier call today was with state appropriations, that's one number, that allows us to spend, but then we are given a cash spend target, and that is often less than the state appropriations. So just because we receive funding from the state government, for a service, we can't exceed this cash spend target, and we are going to be tied to that very quickly. We do not have that cash spend target yet, and so it makes it a little bit difficult for us to commit to any state funds beyond what has been previously committed prior to this fiscal year. It's not unique to transportation, transit, or IMD. It's all divisions within NCDOT. We're all being pretty much limited to meeting previous obligations versus future obligations. If we have already received our signed completed agreements, does that mean the state match is available, both capital and admin? Again, it depends on what year we're talking about, whether it's fiscal year 20 or 21. My understanding was that fiscal year 20 agreements did have the state match. And again, we are trying to meet all of our previous obligations. If you've got a specific question like that, please reach out to your MDS and we can verify the funding amounts for that agreement. Are there any updates on the DHHS CARES Act funding for Tier 1 counties? Yeah, that's a good question. The update that we have right now on that is they have developed a agreement or an MOU between DHHS and NCDOT for the CARES Act money. We are reviewing that right now. There was a little bit of miscommunication on the part between DHHS and DOT. We thought that we were going to tell them how to distribute the money and they were going to distribute. They thought they were going to give us the money and we were going to distribute. And so the issue right now and the holdup basically is to try and determine how to get the money out. We know what level each county will receive. It's just a matter of figuring out how to actually administer those funds. As soon as we know more, we will obviously target or contact the Tier 1 rural counties directly to let them know what the next steps will be and how to access those funds. Kind of related to last call, if you've been holding on any claims because of this money that we thought was going to be coming out quickly, please go ahead and submit them at least for the month. So that way we can go ahead and show drawdown to CARES Act funding. Was there ever a decision made for moving advertising promotional 5311 funds around this year to help cover more essential expenses? I would ask Tammy to answer this question. Tammy, do you want to try again, see if your reception's any better?
This is Myra. I'll chime in.
Thank you, Myra.
We did allow some recipients to move money from marketing and promotional line items, cover any needs in the rest of their budget. But you do have to leave the 2% in the marketing line item that is required for the budget. So you can move all the other funds if you need it for anything else through, over the rest of your budget.
Okay, thank you, Myra. Next one is actually a statement about the questions on how to make amendments. If you go into EBS, there are instructions on how to make amendments. If those instructions are not adequate, again, please reach out to your MDS for guidance on how to make those changes. Are monthly CARES Act claims appropriate versus quarterly if they do that? Again, I mean, it obviously depends on how your financial systems are set up. We are allowing you to submit claims up to once per month. If it's too difficult for you to do that other than quarterly, then, we understand that, but we will allow you to submit claims more frequently than quarterly. Is the purchase of new radios considered admin, operational, or capital? I believe capital, but I'm hoping for operational since they are required for daily dispatch, etc. My understanding is that if the purchase extends beyond a year, it is considered capital. And so I would assume that this would also be capital.
That is correct. It is considered capital.
Thank you, Myra. See,
You're
I'm learning something. Knowing if there is a state match for admin and capital for fiscal year 21 is something that all of the systems need to know. I figured my county budget with the state funding, and we understand that. We understand the implications for the uncertainty. We felt, however, that it was more important for us to present systems with the worst case scenario with respect to state funding availability than approving and making a commitment for state funding for projects and then not being able to meet those obligations. So again, if you've got a specific question with respect to funding for fiscal year 21 grants, it all depends on where they fell in the cash spend plan. Previous funded projects fiscal year 20 and earlier should have the state match in them. Fiscal year 21 and later, it's kind of on a case by case. I shouldn't say case by case, but it is something that we need to look into further. And a lot of those decisions will not be able to be made until we get our final cash spend targets and the budget approved by the board and the OSBM, which should be in the next couple weeks. One of our local governments is receiving their own CARES funds. They would like to use some of these funds to cover their local matching responsibilities. Is that okay? Or is it wrong for local governments to supplant their match responsibilities with CARES? I really can't speak to that. Obviously, in many situations, if you're using federal funds, they can't match other federal funds. I would assume that same restriction applies in this situation. With respect to supplanting, there's obviously the intent of the CARES Act to, offset losses due to COVID-19. But if there's not set requirements to disallow it, that this is a decision that would need to be made on a local level. You can certainly, reach out to us and provide additional information and details, and we can certainly be happy to look into it. But we are, more focused on the CARES Act funding that we were receiving for transit, and for those funds, being 100% level, 100% federal, they still can't be used to match other federal grants. Will the DHHS CARES Act funding for Tier 1 counties go directly to the counties or to the transit system? The way we have it set up right now is it's going to go to the transit systems. The purpose of the funding in our conversations with DHHS was to provide transportation services. And as it is the transit systems who are providing those services, that's how we set up the distribution table that we provided to them, was to the transit system, not to the counties. My grant agreement for fiscal year 21 shows a state match. Does that still stand, or should I remove it? Again, we will we'll provide clarification on all the fiscal year 21 state grants. I will say again, if there is a state match, those agreements are not going through until we have our budget finalized, which hopefully will be in the next 2 weeks. And by then we will know. We will for sure know how much money we have in our cash spend targets, and how we can, do our monthly modal spend plans to ensure that we do not go over that budget. So I hate that there's this period of uncertainty, but similarly to how the federal government has a 2 to 3 month shutdown, slowdown as they change over their fiscal year. I envision that that's the working model that DOT is going to have moving forward, at least until we get a better understanding of how much money we spend per year, how much money we receive, so that we can ensure that our cash flow is appropriate for our commitments. Will any urban funding be available in fiscal year 21? The only fiscal year 21 application currently available is the 5303. Right now we are doing applications for fiscal year 22. That's what Carolyn is working on right now. Any applications that were not released last year most likely will not be done for this year. So we can I will verify that, but I'm going to assume that the urban funding for fiscal year 21 that we would normally have done a call from, it will have to depend on how much money we have in our cash spend plan after we meet our previous obligations. After receiving CARES Act funds from our initial claim, can we use funds received to purchase vehicles to continue to offer the same level of service due to social distancing? Again, at this point, all of the CARES Act funding that is flowing through NCDOT, both the phase 1 and phase 2, is for operations. It is not for capital. If you've got capital needs, that is something that we will hopefully be able to address in the phase 3 of funding, assuming that we are able to meet all the operational requirements of all of the systems that we are working to support through the 5311 CARES Act funding. So because of the way we submitted it to FTA, the only funding that we have approved for use is for operations. So next question is, our fiscal year 21 combined capital grants do not have a state match. When will they be signed? I will go ahead and make a note of that one, because again, my understanding is the ones that do not require a state match should be moving forward. Just to give you another insight to some of the other levels of oversight that we are being subjected to that are new, is that all agreements have to go through a multi-pronged review process, and it's a new tool. I mean, it's not, it's a smart sheet, but it's new to us to how it actually moves and operates. So some of those projects that do not have a state match, they should have been approved. They should have been approved all the way up to the ability to execute agreements, but it's new, and so we're trying to figure it out, and I can look into those specific issues moving forward. Are we supposed to put the CARES money we received into OpStats? If so, won't that skew the data? Kai, are you on the phone? Oftentimes he is. Apparently he's not today. I'll have to follow up with that. I'm not sure how we want to handle that. I do agree that if we were to include them, it could skew the results. So we will.
Heather, sorry, I had double muted again. You only put in the money that you spent, not the money that you've been allocated.
Okay. All right, so let us know why you are not drawing down the CARES fund. You should send the email to. Go ahead and send it to your MDS, and then we will collect those responses, and I will then, find out if there's similar threads across all the responses and consolidate that into a single response to management. Okay, these are two more questions about op stats. A follow-up to the first one, Kai, that will skew the data when considering trip provision per mile. And then on CARES op stats, do we show our reimbursement and revenue?
I'm not sure I understand how it's going to skew the data. I mean, the FY is going to look crazy in FY21 compared to the past. NCD is not be basing our FY22 on what's going on. Basically, be able to stay when it turns into money for 5311. So they've made it clear that they want the data to be accurate, even if it looks bad. So we're the and you show the reimbursements in revenues. That would be a federal revenue.
So we'll do a follow-up on all of those CARES op stats, and we will consolidate those answers and send them out with these questions. Is ROPE now considered operational funding? I'm not exactly sure what this question is referring to. If you've got rope that was carried over from last year, it is still to be used how rope was traditionally being used. I think maybe some of the confusion may be that we have used rope in calculation of several of the CARES Act funding, whether it be phase 2 or whether it be this DHHS funding. It doesn't change the fact that it's CARES Act funding. It is just a mechanism and a tool that we've used to determine how to allocate a big chunk of change into multiple systems. Currently, we have plexiglass set up around the driver's area, but not any in the passenger seating area. To improve safety, social distancing of passengers, we have made a decision to sharply reduce the total capacity of vans, basically down to 2 to 3 riders on a 13-passenger. Would adding plexiglass dividers between seats on the back of each seat mean that we could put one person in each row as long as they are staggered from side to side perspective, or would plexi dividers just be something that looks good and does not provide a limited barrier but time spent on the vehicle? These are all, I mean, this is all great questions. And so when we have that, I really do encourage you to attend the September 9th because we have one of the guest speakers will be speaking to this to a certain extent. There's a lot when it comes to, I'm an air quality engineer, so I did dispersion modeling. And when you're talking about airflow from individuals within a vehicle, it's basically a dispersion model. And understanding how airflow moves within a van, how it is disrupted based on barriers, it's very complicated. So the hope is with this person that we have coming on September 9th, that they will give you a better insight into how you should invest in improvements to your vehicles, whether barriers make the most sense, whether it's, opening the windows, for instance, what kind of things that you can do that can help, minimize the exposure to not only the passengers, but also obviously the driver. How do we know if we have rope rollover funds? Carolyn, you want to answer that question? I mean, I would think that they would have a better idea. I mean, we did send out the policy memo indicating that if you wanted to roll over funds, you had that ability. Your report should have been submitted. So, Carolyn, do you want to take that one?
Sure. When the rope report is completed for period 2, that is the annual report for this year. If you have unspent funds at the end of the second period, that is your carryover, your rollover fund stay with you, and you can use when we're in the next fiscal year. You can use now and to perform your trip. So it would be recorded on your period 2 report, probably at the top where it breaks it down for EdTap, employment, and RDP, and then there's a grand total.
Right. So, I mean, basically, we are not going to ask you to return your ROPE or SMAP funds. If you had SMAP funds, you can continue to use them, as per usual for the next fiscal year. Next question is, will the second call for CARES money allow for the purchase of vehicles? It was our intent that the third call or the third phase of CARES Act funding would allow for capital investments. This would include the purchase of vehicles. A lot of it really depends on whether we are able to meet the operational needs of all of our transit systems, through the funding that we have already distributed. And of course, this is in relationship to the 5311 CT systems. All of the money that we administer is for those systems. If you are a direct 5307 or a subrecipient, or excuse me, a GA 5307, that's how you submitted your application. So if you submitted your application to FTA or through us, and you showed capital investments, then obviously it could be used for capital investments. But for the 5311 that we are administering right now, everything is for operations, and it really is to be determined depending on what level of funding need is demonstrated by the systems for operations. Okay, so we'll give everyone just a couple more minutes to see if there's any additional questions. And while we wait for that, I just want to, again, remind you to fill out those surveys, as soon as possible. As I promised you several weeks ago, we will be asking for additional information moving forward. It's very important for us to get these, more frequent updates with respect to data so we can help inform our management as well as the legislature to determine, what the needs actually are. And, we can't wait till, once a year to be able to, wait for the OPSATS reports to get that information, and we will need it more frequently. Also encourage you again, if you have not already registered for the September 9th working on it for NC Transit Cares meeting, please do so. I think we're going to have some, great information and discussion on that meeting as well. So that gave us an additional couple minutes, and I'm not seeing any additional questions. So with that, I will go ahead and wrap up today's call. Again, if you have any questions, please reach out to your MDSs. You should have received your assignment of your new MDS person last week or the week before. Or if you have any district questions, feel free to reach out to me as well, and we will get those questions answered for you. Thanks a lot, and you have a great rest of the day.